Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome all the attendees to our LexEnergy webinar on the launch of .au. My name is Toby Wildig and I'm the Marketing Manager here at LexEnergy. For those of you who are unaware, LexEnergy is a global domain and online brand protection company with offices in the UK, US and South Africa. We're pleased that you have joined us for this call today and we hope you find this information useful. On this webinar, we'll be discussing both the significant threat and opportunity the launch of .au possesses, as well as the registration process and next steps businesses should look to undertake. We'll leave some time at the end of the call for questions and answers, so if you do have a question, please send them through using the Q&A function on the WebEx. I would now like to introduce Daniel Greenberg, the presenter for today's webinar. Daniel is the CEO and founder of LexEnergy and an admitted attorney, although non-practicing, in both the UK and South Africa. He has over 18 years experience in trademarks, copyright and domain names and has recently been selected to be a member of the Marks Brands and Marketing Committee. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Daniel to begin today's presentation.
Great. Thank you, Toby. Thank you for that introduction. I'd like to welcome all the attendees once again. And this webinar is very important at this stage of the .au domain name. It was recently announced by AUDA, which is the domain name authority in Australia. And this will have a fundamental change in the AU domain name space. So the position is currently you would own your own com.au domain name, such as yourdomain.com.au. A third party could own variants within the third level. So that is yourdomain.net.au, .org.au. So with those traditional .au domain names, the AUDA wants to launch .au directly at the second level. So as you can see there, yourdomain.com.au. This is equivalent to Australia changing its dialing code, international dialing code, from +61 to +6. And it could lead to customers ringing other businesses if they forget or omit a part of the number, or in this case, for the domain name, the extension, if they leave out the .com. So in this webinar, we're going to cover the threats and opportunities that this new extension holds for domain name owners, brand owners, and what should be done to make sure that you secure your position within the .au domain space. So as a potential threat, what could that be? That could be customer confusion. So for instance, if you own yourdomain.com.au and someone has registered yourdomain.au, there are two technically identical domain names, barring the extension, that have a presence on the web. So you have to make sure that you secure yours before the other party. It could be a costly future acquisition. You could, or you may have to lay out money to buy the other domains to make sure that your portfolio is as comprehensive as possible and that you have an effective defensive strategy. And it could weaken your defensive strategy. Any trademark owner would want to make sure that they secure the relevant domain names in their portfolio. And for you to own a com.au and an unrelated third party, the .au, that would cause tremendous confusion and dilute potentially your rights in Australia. And then the fourth point, which links to the defensive strategy, is the reduced brand protection, in that a third party would own that. In our past experiences, we've participated in the launch of .ng for Nigeria, .uk for the United Kingdom. And what happened was, because the launch dates were so far away, the application process took a long time, or the allocation process. Trademark owners, law firms pushed it to the side, waiting for the launch date. And when that arrived, they either missed it, they failed to secure the relevant domains, and then they had to engage in other tactics to try and recover the domain, which can be quite costly. So moving on, it's all not doom and gloom. There are opportunities. So what it does do is it allows you to have a more memorable domain. com.au is quite a long extension that's got 5 characters, which will now be reduced to 2. Sharp and meaningful. It will allow you to display it easy on business cards, emails, billboards. It also formed part of a defensive strategy. So as you'll see later in the flowchart that we'll present to you, is that if you own a com.au, net.au, or any other .au, you would need to register the complementary .au. They will sit side by side, so it's not one or the other. It's not good enough to say, I have the com.au, so I don't need the .au. You need both. So if you have the .au, you'd also still register the com.au. The com.au will not become redundant. We know from experience in the UK that co.uk is still popular. I think around about 10% of the domain numbers reflect that people use .uk instead of co.uk, but that's relatively small. And what this also does is, from a social media perspective, it does reduce the characters if you do display your domain name there. There are a lot of advantages, but you have to balance and be aware of the threats as well. So moving on, we've prepared a flowchart. What's happened is with the launch of .au, it was announced quite recently. There's been a lot of information reported in the media on a very basic level. Also, when you go through the outer website, it's all written out. It is quite confusing, so we've tried to simplify it, and we hope we've done that in this flowchart. If there are any questions and you're listening to this recording, please reach out to us, and we will advise you on how to best secure your .au domain. So the first step is, do you have an existing .au domain? So for instance, you own yourdomain.com.au. If the answer is yes, then there is a priority application period, which will start on the 24th of March and run until the 24th of September 2022. And this will last for 6 months. The next question is, if you do have this domain name, you have to determine, does a third party have an identical domain name to you? So if you own yourdomain.com.au and a third party owns yourdomain.org.au, then there are two parties with the identical domain name. So what happens next? If there's no third party, you can go ahead and register your domain. So that's relatively straightforward. However, if a third party does have an identical domain name, then the date of your registration becomes relevant. Was your domain registered before the 24th of February 2018? This is the cutoff date. If it was registered before the 24th of February 2018, then you fall into a Category 1 application. Once again, within the Category 1 application, there could be multiple applications. For instance, the org.au or net.au was registered around the same period as yours, or even before. What options are available? If there are no applications in the Category 1, then that's relatively straightforward once again, and you can go through to registration. However, if there are multiple parties that have a .au that was registered before the 24th of February 2018, then the rules state that you have to reach an agreement with the other registrants on who should register that particular domain. So all the parties, there could be 3 or more, would have to get together to come to an agreement. If you come to an agreement and they all agree that you can register it, then you can proceed to registration. However, if there is no agreement, and this is possible in that the org.au owner wants it and yourself, what happens then when you cannot reach an agreement? The domain name will remain unallocated until one applicant remains. And according to the rules, this interest will be renewed every year until there is one remaining. So there is a strategy on waiting it out, how to process your application if you hit this roadblock. So we would advise you to reach out to us and discuss the options should this be apparent when you do your assessment. And also feel free to reach out to us and send us through your list of domains so we can advise you and arrange a discussion on how best to deal with a situation like this. Now on the other side, so when we ask the question, was your domain registered before 24 February 2018? If it wasn't, Then you go into a Category 2 application. And the question you'd have to ask yourself, are there any Category 1 applications at the same time? If there is a Category 1 application, they would have priority and it would be allocated to them. So in this particular case, if you go through this flowchart and you realize that that is the situation, please reach out to us and we can advise you on what options you would have available. However, if there aren't any Category 1 applications, it's allocated to the applicant with the earliest creation date. So if you registered your domain name in 2019 and someone else, the org.au, a year later, you would be entitled to register that particular domain. So that would go through to registration. So it looks fairly complicated, but if you follow the rules quite meticulously, you will get to the point at which you can register your domain. Now moving to the other side, what will happen at the same time, if you want to register a domain, but you don't have a com.au at the moment, you have to ask whether anyone else has a matching.com.au. This is if you just wanted to register one now. If it's available in all the .au extensions, like org.uk, com.au. I'm so used to the UK. So with com.au, what would happen is if there's no org.au, net.au, then it would proceed to registration. It would be a normal domain name that you would register. In this particular case, we would suggest registering the com.au and .au domains. If a third party has applied in the priority period and you find that out, but you don't have a .au domain, then it will be difficult or impossible to register. And that's when you reach out to us to discuss possible solutions on how to overcome that situation. However, if no one has applied during that period, what you can do is you can wait until that priority application has completed, and then you can register your domain. So you'd have to be patient and wait those 6 months in order to register your .au domain. So that is an overview. I hope it's easy to understand with the ticks and crosses, but if you go through each step, it should assist you in determining which stage you would be able to secure your .au domain. And once again, you can reach out to us if it is confusing and you require clarity. The idea is that we would go through your entire portfolio and then determine the stages for each .au registration and where you qualify, so you have a strategy in place to address that. So, like I said, be prepared. So the launch is on the 24th of March, 2022. It does sound like a long time away, but it takes time to establish what path you would follow in order to secure your domain names. And then we'd have to make sure that you have the relevant resources, in that there could be some expensive solutions. So in that case, you would have to prepare the necessary budget and also have a strategy to understand the registration process and how best to secure your domain. So once again, I'd like to thank you for attending, and please feel free to reach out for a strategy and advice. If you have any questions regarding the .au launch, and obviously there could be situations where your competition would be also trying to secure certain domains, maybe in a generic namespace where you don't have trademark rights. So reach out to us for that and we can discuss and run you through it. Feel free to reach out to us at any one of our offices. We do have access numbers in the UK, US, South Africa, Ireland, and Australia. So if you're Australian based and want to address this, or if you're an Australian law firm and need assistance or guidance in advising your clients, feel free to reach out to us. I'm just checking if there are any questions. I don't see any questions. Hopefully I've covered all the various aspects for the launch of .au. Once again, I'd like to thank you for attending, and I look forward to our next webinar.